Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back to another episode of A Queen's Roundtable show and podcast. This particular segment is a Born to Lead, or part of the Born to Lead docuseries. So I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Kabai Harrison. And just so you know, the show slash podcast streams every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can find us on the Realizing Your Potential TV network, which streams on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku TV. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And for those of you that want to check us out on your mobile, we are an app on the iOS as well as Android mobile. So my guest today is another Jackie, and I'm going to just briefly read her, tell you just a little bit about her, and then I'm going to bring her into the studio and she's going to join us. So Jackie is a globally recognized leadership strategist, best-selling author, and keynote speaker who has spent her career shaping how leaders drive impact, influence, and results in times of transformation. With a psychology degree from Duke University, a master's in human development and psychology from Harvard, and a certification in neuroscience for business from MIT, she helps top executives, Fortune 500 companies, including, I guess it's Intuit. We'll see if I pronounce that correctly. Nestlé and Crocs, and elite teams building high performing, trust driven cultures that deliver measurable success, even in the face of disruption. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, CEO World magazine, HR.com, and other top business and leadership publications. A driving force behind a leadership philosophy that empowers people to rise, Jackie's impact extends from boardrooms to classrooms. So let's give it up for Jackie.
Hi.
How you doing, Jackie?
I'm great. Good to see you, Jackie.
Good to see you too. I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce your last name. I didn't want to mess it up. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, please.
Jackie Insinger.
Insinger, okay.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about you, Jackie.
And you covered a lot of it in the bio. So in human, real person, not bio terms, I'm a female entrepreneur, just like many of your listeners today. And I'm out there trying to make an impact based on what I believe and my spark and my passion and my talent, and trying to bring new current leadership strategies to the corporate world and also to classrooms now to really spark that passion and reignite that fulfillment and positivity back in the workplace and in schools as well, that I feel like we're so desperately missing today.
Okay. All right. And when we talked before, you said you are a full-time entrepreneur.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess, first off, how long have you been doing that? And did you transition from a corporate setting?
So I have had this business for over 15 years. So I've been doing this for a while. And, I had a bit of a squiggly path before, like a lot of us entrepreneurs do, where you kind of you're in a company or you're in a role and you're just like, gosh, I just feel like I could have a greater impact or I would do it differently. And a lot of us kind of have that itch, from young days. And I've always had that. And so I started a company based on a gap that I saw and a possibility of something that I could create some real impact a long time ago. And I just kept iterating and evolving from there until where I am today. And I'm sure it'll be keep iterating and evolving.
Okay. And what was that gap?
So what I found was in terms of leadership in the workplace, there were two things. One was we want to simplify what leaders need to do based on what works today, not based on what worked 10 years ago, right? And as the world changes, leaders need to change. And the way we do leadership needs to evolve and change with the world around us. And a lot of us get really stuck in our ways and we don't train people on how to lead people. We often train people on how to manage things, right? And you're so excellent at managing a thing that you get promoted to now leading people who manage the thing. And nobody knows how to do that, especially as things change in the world with 4 generations in the workplace, hybrid and remote environments, really high burnout rates, really low engagement scores, right? We're in economic uncertainty, fast pace of change, AI. Nobody knows what to do. So I study all the global research and simplify and test strategies for leaders to use that create the change that we need to see in workplaces for people to get on board with the changes instead of be really resistant and burnt out and actually really like going to work again. And that's kind of what I do.
Okay. So I know you're not going to go, hugely into detail, but maybe if you could just share one item, I guess, that you find that that keeps to resurface, I guess, maybe throughout your, or a particular pattern and how you handle that or how you teach leaders to address that makes their employees or all the individuals under them helps them to buy into
Mm,
the whole company
yeah.
atmosphere, I guess.
So one of the new, what some of the new data that recently came out in 2025 by Gallup
Mhm.
showed that the number one thing people are asking for or wanting from their leaders today globally is hope,
Hmm.
which is really interesting. Most people traditionally, especially high level leaders, think like a promotion, more pay, more flexibility. But what people are saying right now is hope. And I define hope as the intersection where positivity and authenticity meet. I
Hmm.
think that's a very magical sweet spot. And so I try to teach leaders, how do you create hope? Because what happens is we're changing at such a fast pace. There's so much uncertainty, there's so much ambiguity, right? There's so much volatility. And people are scared and they're overwhelmed and often under-resourced. So when a leader can provide that space of authenticity and positivity, authenticity builds trust, and people need trust in their leader. And positivity creates that sense of faith that we're going to figure it out and we're going to be okay, right? We've got the right people on the bus with us to get this figured out, to get to an outcome. We might not know what it looks like yet, but I trust that together we'll figure it out. And when a leader can find that spot, I think like hope in action right there, that really brings people along through times of uncertainty and disruption.
I like that. Hope. And then you said it's the intersecting of authenticity and positivity.
Mhm.
And the positivity is we're going to figure this out. We
Mhm.
know or acknowledging that things are often changing and that sometimes things may be uncertain, but we're all in this together and we're going to figure it out. That's
Yeah.
the positivity piece. And the authenticity piece is um like I'm a real person and I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I know where to, get the answers.
Mhm.
And is it also a part of that too? Um I don't know, not necessarily sharing in the fear, if you will, but I guess kind of maybe acknowledging some of it, acknowledging some of the uncertainty. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, that transparency, that authentic connection of we are humans together in this,
Okay.
right? And but I've got this with us, right? You can trust me. And I think that trust is that authenticity to say, like, this is tough.
Hmm.
We don't have the answer yet, but I know that we're going to figure it out together. These are the pieces that are missing right now. These are the things that we have to work on, right? And so being able to share in that without sitting too deep in the fear, right? I call that practical optimism too. It's like, yes, we're optimistic, we're looking forward, but we're not denying the hard. Like we're
Hmm.
looking at what's real and then we're looking toward the future, right? With that positive outlook.
Okay. Wow, I like that. I'm gonna
Thanks.
kind of sit with that for a minute. I really like that. Um, of course, that comes up often, and it makes me reflect on different leadership styles that I've had or that I've experienced in the past.
Mhm.
And I know for me, the authenticity piece is huge for me.
Yeah.
Is and the biggest thing that stands out for me is you don't have to pretend to know everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because things are changing and we're not perfect. Leaders, just like anyone, have strengths, we have weaknesses, you know and we have, again, areas that we need to grow in.
Mhm.
So no one person is going to have it all together and have all the answers. And I just wish I could just sit all of the people in leadership down and just say, listen, you don't know everything, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yes.
We're not expecting
Exactly.
you to know everything.
Yes, exactly, and that's where people don't trust you if you
Mm.
pretend that you know it all, because we know we can't, especially today with the rapid change we're in and all the disruption and all the unknown, like, we know that, and so you can't really trust a leader who pretends they know something that we know you don't know because you can't.
You can't.
You know?
Exactly. And I'm a therapist, and there's in nonprofit there's always a lot of changes because it's basically dependent upon grants. Like a lot of everything is grant funded, and when things change and things shift, you may get the funding renewed or you may not, or maybe
Yeah.
this time the funders are looking for this particular result, and then 2 years ago they were looking for this, and then you have now with AI, like they have something where it'll like it's a little device and you turn it on, and it's also in programmed in your computer, in your laptop. And what it'll do is basically write the notes for me. Like it'll take and listen to our session,
Mhm.
and then it kind of picks up different patterns on my therapeutic processes, if you will, right? And then it comes up, it basically generates like a note, so of course I'm thinking in my head, so okay, so how soon are people gonna be coming in for services? And it's just gonna be like an AI figure, just
Right.
just giving them, oh well, okay, so this is your problem. Okay, well, this is the, whatever. I'm just saying, our minds just kind of go run
Of
away with us,
course.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, and what I think around that is the human connection piece with what you do, with what I do,
Mhm.
is always gonna be necessary because we crave human connection, and that is such a big piece of fulfillment in our lives, right? It's the number one predictor of a long, healthy, happy life is the quality of our connections, and that's by, Harvard study of adult development going on for over 80 years. That's the number one predictor of a long, healthy, happy, and successful life is the quality of our relationships, and so when you think about, right, we're in this loneliness epidemic right now in the world. And people, since COVID, right, we crave this human connection that we became, it became so distant. It became something we didn't have as much. And the more we are behind a screen, the more we do Zoom, the more we are on social media, the less of this human connection and the energy exchange that we have. that it's this like getting back to that basic piece that was the foundation of our existence, right? That was kind of taken away by all the computer and all the devices. And then, COVID really accelerated that. Now we're at this point of that is so that the times that we do have that presence of that energy exchange of human connection is so critical for us to be fulfilled as humans, that I think the more and more that's going to be needed, that AI maybe can replace strategies, but it can't replace that I see you, right? I hear you, I see you, you matter. And I think that's a piece that I'm hoping will never be replaced.
Yeah, but it just kind of gets you to wondering and this may sound a little funny, but I like to refer to them as the powers that be, meaning the individuals that are really, making these decisions. Because, I mean, I know for me, I'm not making that decision. That's way,
Yeah.
way, way above me. And sometimes you just even wonder, do they acknowledge that what you just shared about,
Yeah.
everyone wants to be seen and the, human connection, is that even acknowledged? I mean,
Yeah.
I know you may not
I don't
necessarily
know.
just kind of throwing something out there,
And my hope is that even if it's not acknowledged, and even if it's all rushed at us to be using all of this AI instead of human connection, that ultimately, as humans, we will make it the priority and we will get back to that, is my hope.
Yes. So speaking of after COVID, so COVID, the lockdown was in what, 2020. So here we are in 2025. Oh my God, time goes by so
Crazy.
fast. Mm. Do you feel that we have kind of healed from it, or do you still think that there are some lasting? Because I know you mentioned, and I can't remember how you phrased it exactly, but you talked about loneliness.
Mhm.
So do you think that a lot of us are still working our way back, or what are your thoughts?
I do. I don't think we've healed from it. I think we're in a different direction. I think things have accelerated at a really fast pace. I
Okay.
think, with all the back to office debates and policies changing and, do we go back in? Do we not? Do we do better in person? Do we not? And there's the pros and cons on all the sides of it. And I think there's this piece of distance that's happened
Okay.
since then, where, I think we've seen the value of human connection so much of what I heard during that time of being present with your family, being stuck in a place where you had nothing else to distract you and you were just there with the people you love, hopefully, right? It brought out a different part of realizing what really matters and what's really important, and at the same time, we were so distanced from everyone else. So it
Mhm.
was like an interesting paradigm where we saw the beauty of the authentic connection because we were forced to. And we saw the distance of not having that connection outside of the home, which was really hard. And so then when you go back to work and it's all hybrid and remote and you don't have that day to day connection, I think we realize that it can be lonely and it can be hard working kind of at an island that way. Does that make
Sorry, you
any?
know why I'm chuckling because I'm thinking two things. One thing that's hilarious to me, and then another is more on a serious note. But some people were like, "Oh my I'm so ready to get back to work because
Yeah.
my spouse or my kids or whomever are driving me nuts. I can't wait to get
Yes.
back to go back into work. So that was one aspect of it. That was the part I was
Mhm.
chuckling about. But the more on a more serious, sad note was that there was an increase in like domestic partner violence. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because people were
Mhm.
forced, you know, to spend time with those other individuals. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I
Oh,
heard that a lot. And then also too, like working in community mental health, there were a lot of people that their mental health declined as
mhm.
a result of the isolation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There was a lot of that, and I think that's part of the lingering loneliness piece.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it really it was an experience.
Mhm.
Um just, just kind of thinking back to it, it was an experience, and it was very, it was scary because you had no idea. Because I know in the very beginning, and then I'll just say this, and then we could, leave it. But I just remember, like in the very beginning, we kept thinking, "Oh, okay, well, next week or so, a month or whatever, everything will be back to, And then when it got to a point where it's like, okay, so we have no idea,
Mhm.
what it's going to be like, or how long this is going to go on, and just that feeling of uncertainty, and it just being just sweeping, just sweeping across. I'll just say, I mean, I know it was everywhere, but I'll just say, just nationwide, was just,
Mhm.
it was really scary. It was
Yeah.
really scary.
Yeah.
So,
There's so much on everything we ever knew was
hmm.
taken away, right?
Yep.
School for kids, like that. You never would think that would be the case.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was rough. Okay, so let's segue into, and I know we touched base on it already about the work that you do, and one of the some of the common themes that you've seen. But let's talk a little bit more about your particular leadership journey.
Okay.
Has there been anything that you could think of, that maybe you can think of and that are willing to share with us, that has happened to you throughout this journey, that was maybe pivotal for you, or that stood out, that was extremely significant for you?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of I always talk about, like, moments that matter, right? That there are these moments that might not feel big, but they're
Mhm.
the moments that matter that if you kind of reflect back on your journey, they were pivotal in how you course corrected or where your life went, and so they might feel small, but they were actually big in impact, and, a couple of the things that hard lessons that I've learned and I'm still learning is one is you can't do it alone.
Mm.
And that's a very big one for me. I have a hard time asking for help, and I just go, I just do it, I just take it on and get to the point where I often can burn myself out by doing, right? And realizing there's only a point at which you can even take something by yourself before you bring in other people or ask them for help, the people that you do have around you, right? So that's a big lesson about pausing, reflecting, and bringing in people who have the skill sets that I don't have too, right, to really help. That's a big one. Another one that I think a lot of high achievers have, and I think probably most of your listeners have some level of high achiever. I think most entrepreneurs have that drive of high achiever is what I call toxic productivity,
Mm.
where it's this feeling of always having to be doing and always having to be achieving and using your minutes always so wisely, right? Like I'm always like, how do I want to use these minutes? And I always have to be getting something done. And it's almost like this external validation for what I do versus who I am. And that's been a hard thing too, is to feel like I'm not wasting time if I'm not being productive, and that sometimes the time that I'm not being productive is, the most critical time and the rejuvenating time and the time that brings the best ideas and the best clarity and the best memories. And so that's always an inner battle about trying not to be productive all the time. So those are two things that I still often deal with, that I'm very mindful of. And I know when I make the good decisions, things open up. And
Right.
when I go back to those patterns, things kind of there's, kind of blocks that come in the way.
Okay. And what did you call it? Productivity, toxicity,
Toxic productivity.
productivity. I like that. I like that. And yeah, I feel like that too. Sometimes I feel like I always have to be doing something. Like, okay, like I want to relax. I'm in a zone here, but then it's like there's this almost like, you have those little two people on
Yeah.
you. One person is saying, you need to be, there's something you need to do. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? It's like this little boy, the other one is like, oh, but just relax for a minute. You're exhausted,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so
Yeah.
it's like kind of going back and forth.
Yeah. It is, and it's an interesting thing. You almost have to reframe it as, and in my mind, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but looking at it as, okay, I'm going to take 2 hours to relax because
Mhm.
the goal of that will be to refresh me for XYZ. But then it's also putting the spin on it has to be productive.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're right. It has to, right.
Instead of
Because
just I'm tired.
yep, yep. That's what I do. I do the same thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's one of the curses of being, a high achiever is
Hmm.
this feeling of always needing to move the needle forward and always needing to achieve something. And the
Hmm.
goalpost keeps moving away, right? Farther and farther away. And instead of reflecting back on our day of, look at all the things I checked off my list, we usually look back on the day and see the things that we didn't.
We
Oh,
didn't.
I didn't get this done, or I can't believe I didn't do this, or I forgot to call and schedule this thing, right? We're always looking at what I didn't do instead of what we did do.
Mhm.
And so that's the mindset of this deficit versus this like, "Oh, I'm gonna celebrate me," right? And
Mhm.
so that's so much of the work that I do with clients that I try to bring to myself, right? Of, you have to celebrate those small wins because they build and that's what creates momentum. And we have to see those and celebrate those and focus on those.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me kind of piggyback on that. So what have you learned, or two things. What have you learned that has made you a better leader? And I don't know, it could be expanding on what you have already
Mhm.
shared or something else. And number two, do you know what your leadership style is?
Yeah. So, okay. So what have I learned or about to be a better leader? I think I really try to bring in people who have different strengths than me. And that's a really big piece of what I learned. I talk a lot about and I teach a lot with my clients of finding your spark. And I define your spark as the intersection where your talent meets your passion, right? So it's your strengths that energize you, really. Because you can be really good at something and it drains you, right? A lot of us are really practiced at something and we could be very good at something, but it's not something that energizes us. And, I work with a lot of leaders and they climb the ladder and they climb the ladder and they're really excellent at their work. And then they get to the top of the ladder and they look around, they're like, oh no, I don't like this view, right?
Mm.
We
Okay.
keep going and keep going, to the next goal. And we could be really good at something, but it doesn't mean it's fulfilling. So the place where your talent meets your passion is what I call your spark. And the more time you can spend in that area, the more fulfilled you'll be and the less it'll feel like work, right? So what you want to do then is define and find your own spark and then surround yourself with people who have different sparks, right? Because that really rounds you out. And then you have these different people who have different areas of genius that be like, oh, great, you love the detail and implementation and building that stuff. Awesome, because I'm the idea generator and that's where I thrive. So if you can execute on it, that's perfect, right? Instead of finding people that are just like you, finding the people who have different strengths and sparks is so much more effective and efficient. So that's a huge thing I focus on as a leader. So that's a big thing. And I
Okay.
think your part two around how to define my leadership style, one of the things, have you ever watched Ted Lasso?
No.
Okay, great show. Highly
Okay.
recommend it.
Okay.
Ted Lasso, he has a leadership style that I love. And it really is like what we talked about at the beginning, that hope in action, right? That positivity and authenticity.
Okay.
And that's what I always try to do is lead with that optimism, that excitement, that hope, that inspiration that leads to action, right? So inspiring action, not just inspiring, but really creating trust and psychological safety and that human vulnerable connection. I find that is so important to be who you are in all areas of your life. So when people always say to me like, "Oh, should I answer this question how I am at work or how I am at home?" I'm like, should be the same,
Go
right?
ahead. Say it again.
A lot of people, if they're taking, say, a personality test, they
Mm-hmm.
say, should I answer this like how I am at work or how I am at home?
Okay.
And my answer is always, that should always be the same answer because you are who you are authentically. And
Mhm.
if that has to change either at home or at work, then what we need to do is find a way to synergize that so you can be you. right? And really stay anchored in who you are and be
Right.
the best version of whatever that is at home and at work. And sometimes we have to stretch ourselves in a different way or take on new skill sets or learn new things or have behavior adaptations. And that's great. That's fine. That's part of being human, but based on who you authentically are, right? So I truly believe we should be who we are authentically and really anchor in that and then grow from there. So as a leader, I really try to focus on that for my team and for me, of
Okay.
really being open and vulnerable and authentic to who I am.
Do you find that sometimes you even have to help people or guide them in the direction to even figure out who they really are?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's because I think sometimes people may wear so many different hats that sometimes they don't even really know.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. And I talk a lot about, and it's in my book and it's through my programs, shifting from the golden rule to the platinum rule. So the
Okay.
golden rule, right? Treat others the way we wish to be treated. And that works well in large societies because it's usually like a guideline for inappropriate behavior, right? Like, don't do this. But in real relationships, I don't believe it works, right? Because who's to say that you want feedback the same way I want feedback, right?
Okay.
Or that my kids are going to want support the same way I want support, right? And so when you really think about it, we want to flip to platinum. And the platinum rule is treat others the way they wish to be treated.
Mm,
And I believe that is the number one way to create meaningful and effective relationships in any area of our life. But we have to find out, how do people want to be treated? Right.
okay.
So asking questions, I call them platinum questions, like, how do you like feedback? How would you like help right now? What would feel supportive to you in this moment? How can we do better for you next time? Right. And so for instance, if my husband's having a tough day, my response would naturally be what I would want. Right. So I feel like I'm so helpful because I'm going to step in and do what works for me. And that's what we do for people, right? Oh, you're struggling. I'm going to help. I'm going to help and I'm going to do what works for me. And I'm a problem solver. I do not like to sit in negative spaces. So I'm going to go in and try to fix it. Right. That might not be what he needs. So instead of just assuming, we can ask, like, what would feel most helpful to you right now? Or what can I do that would feel supportive? Right? Asking these questions, or after you give somebody feedback, saying, is there a way I could have said that would have landed better for you? And starting to help understand their experience. And then you can treat them the way they wish to be treated. Right. And same in sharing with other people how you like feedback or what would be most helpful. So when you're having a hard day, being able to say to someone, what would be most helpful for me right now is if I had like 30 minutes to clear my head, and then maybe I can just kind of express to you, what I went through today and just kind of sit in that space. If
Mm,
that's what helps. Or what, I really would love to talk this out because I need to move to some action. Right. But being able to articulate it so that people can give you what you need versus what they think you need.
yeah. Wow. I'm just sitting here thinking about that. And I know sometimes in certain situations, I may not even know. I may just have to take a minute to think
Yes.
about how could you best support me at
Right.
this time. And sometimes I may be so flustered that I just can't even think right now. I just need to I have to say, I'm not trying to be rude. Please, I just need to let me just sit with my thoughts for a second.
And that's
Yeah, and
perfect.
that's okay, right? Yeah.
Yes, and what a gift to somebody else, because they, if not, feel like, "I need to go help," and their instinct is to help based on what's helpful for them, which
Right.
might not at all be helpful for you. And so but people wanna help, and so if you can say, "I don't know what I need right now, but what I feel is I need 30 minutes, I just need to sit with my thoughts, and then I'll ask you if I know what I need or if there's something that would be helpful." But being able to express it, but how interesting, right? You are a therapist, you are a doctor, and even that simple question, you're like, "I don't know if I'll know." So
Mhm.
you think about people who aren't as self-aware, who don't do as much self-reflective work. Most of us don't know.
Just
And
don't.
so that gift of saying, "How do you like feedback?" And then people saying, "Gosh, I've never been asked that before."
Mhm.
Right? And then all of a sudden being like, "I guess it does matter how I feel or
Right.
how I like feedback or how I want you to communicate things with me. Let me
Mhm.
think about it. Let me sit with that."
Right.
And it's opening it up, like, you matter in this relationship. How you feel about this matters.
Yep, absolutely. Wow. So now, do you? I would assume you teach that or some form of that, right? When you
Mhm,
go into
mhm,
corporate, into
mhm.
these companies, and you're training their leaders.
Yes, and sometimes, people don't know the answer, and oftentimes what people say when you ask, "How do you like feedback?" Most people feel like they're supposed to say, "Oh, I like it direct and often," right? Most people think they should want it that way. And then when you try it, it's like, "Ooh, that didn't feel good," right? And they're usually defensive or they're posturing around it or protecting or, coming up with reasons or not shutting down. And then it doesn't even matter because nobody's hearing what you're saying anyway. And so then following up after that, it's a living, breathing process to be able to say, "That didn't feel like it went very well. Is there another way I could have said that that would have felt better?" Right? Just following up.
Mhm.
And often in workplaces, people don't tell you, like, "I didn't like how that went down." They don't usually say that to their boss. What
Right.
usually happens, there becomes a little resentment, a little
Mm.
mistrust. "I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable." And then slowly their foot's out the door and they leave, right? So but at home, you sometimes have relationships where someone can say, like, "That's not helpful. That's not what I want." And they're safe enough to share it. And so in a workplace, we want to foster that kind of communication as a leader where you're asking the questions, where you're following up, where, if someone's stuck on something, say, "What would feel most supportive for you right now?" And they might say, "You know what? I'd really like to meet with you weekly right now until we get through this." It opens it up,
Right.
right? Or I want to put something together and present it to you and see if I'm on track. But
Mm.
it gives them an opportunity to take some ownership, to take some autonomy and share what do they really need so you're not trying spending all this time and spinning your wheels doing something that actually backfires.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm just as you talking, I'm just thinking about so many just, instances where I've experienced effective versus maybe not so effective leadership.
Mm,
But I guess what I want to ask now is what do you find is the most challenging what's the most challenging concept
mm,
that that you find yourself teaching? Or the individuals that you teach. Let me ask it like this: the individuals that you teach, the leaders that you're teaching, what do you find they have the most difficulty grasping?
So it's a great question. One of the things, like from a broad perspective, and then I'll answer that with a specific answer,
Okay.
is that most things that people want today from their leaders feel like this gray, fluffy,
Mm.
very conceptual area. So I want to feel valued. I want to feel motivated. I want to feel trust and psychological safety, right? So all of these things that I want authentic connection. I want hope, right? So when you say it to people, leaders, they're like, "Yeah, that makes sense." But then when you say, "Well, what does that mean? How does that show up? How do you put that in action?" Nobody knows,
I don't
right?
know.
So that's one of the things that a lot of these very seasoned, experienced, high-level Fortune 100 company leaders, they've been so successful in the past because in the past it was, "Follow me and you'll be successful and you'll get a promotion and you'll get a raise." That's not what people want when they want hope and feeling valued and psychological safety and inspiration. You can't that's not a quantitative thing. And so it's really hard for these leaders to understand, well, what am I supposed to do with this in general? So all these concepts, what my job is to make them very tactical and practical and actionable for these leaders so that they get the results and give people what they need. So that's number one. Number two, the concept that I find that people struggle with the most is psychological safety.
Okay.
And, a lot of people have heard the term or they've seen the TED Talk or something, but they don't really know what it means. Like, what does it really mean to be psychologically safe? And it is known as the number one factor for high performing teams is
Really
psychological
psychological safety. Okay.
psychological safety, which is defined as um, being able to say, "I don't know. I messed up. I have a different idea. Here's a new initiative. I disagree," right? Without fear of shame or judgment.
Mhm.
That's the key
Okay.
piece. Without fear
Okay.
of shame or judgment. So
Okay.
Google did a huge study called Project Aristotle, and it was a 2-year study, global study around 200 different teams around the world. and they wanted to find out what is the number one predictor of their highest performing teams. So they had all these different factors they were measuring, and they assumed it was going to be their superstars, like their highest performers were going to create the highest performing teams. Not even in the top 5. The number one factor far and away was psychological safety, where people felt safe to fully show up as themselves and say, I don't know, I disagree, here's another idea, without fear of shame or judgment.
Okay.
And so I look at psychological safety as a way to encourage courage. Because when people feel safe to say, I made a mistake, you guys, or I disagree, I have another idea, right? Innovation happens. People can take risks. And that's where all the great things come. When people are scared to mess up or scared to say they messed up or shift blame or try to fix it behind the scenes, nobody grows from it. Nobody learns from it, right? If people can't say to their leader, like, I have another idea, I don't think that's the best way, right? We don't get better. And so psychological safety is that number one factor, but it's a vibe, it's a feeling, right? And so when leaders, when we're talking about it, it's like, well, how do you create that vibe on a team where people feel psychologically safe? And that's something that we really work on. Is first we have to define it. What does it mean to you? Let's talk about an experience where you did not feel psychologically safe. What did that feel like? What was the outcome for you? What was the outcome for your work? And then what about a time when you did feel psychologically safe, where you did feel safe to say, I disagree, I messed up, without feeling like somebody's going to look differently at you.
Right.
What was the outcome on you and your work, right? So we have to define, what does it feel like to us, and what was an experience around it. And what's fascinating is leaders, these really high level leaders, get really emotional, really vulnerable when they share a time where they didn't feel safe. And the pattern across the board is people shrink, right? Their whole big energy shrinks down. They felt small. They felt insignificant. They felt powerless. Their confidence went down. In a situation, they had to work their way back up, right?
Okay.
When you feel like you're not safe to be yourself without feeling shamed or judged, or maybe you were called out by a leader in the middle of a meeting, or a coworker did something that always like talked over you or took your ideas, and then most people ended up leaving those jobs. And so we're like, you can inadvertently create that on your team if you don't know what it looks like for your team members, right? So we foster that type of conversation and understanding.
Okay. So this is, oh my God, that's a topic in itself.
Mhm.
Let me just ask one other question about that, because I know we're going to get ready to wrap up. So how long do you work? Because that sounds like a process. How
Mhm.
long do you work with your leaders?
Yeah, so I have programs where where it's a 7-month immersive program with a
So,
group of leaders where we go through these topics one at a time in a very specific order. So we drip them out, and the order is very intentional, that it compounds and grows on the next one.
okay, okay, good. I was just again, this I was like, this is a process. This is like therapy. You know what I mean? Yeah, this okay. All right, so 7 months. All right. Wonderful. So that was great. And I'm pretty sure, ladies, you guys got a lot out of that. And feel free to go back. You probably might have to listen to this a couple of times, because she shared a lot of good information, and you kind of got me to think about things a little bit differently.
Oh, good.
In terms of building my team, because I'm in the process of building my team and trying to not get a whole bunch of people on my team that are like myself, that we each, have to be more strategic about it, you know,
Mhm.
different skill sets. So I'm kind of in the process of doing that myself. But this has been very, very informative for me. I'm pretty sure for everyone else. Please, you can take a listen as often as you like. Please refer other individuals to the network and check out the other awesome interviews from this particular series, the Born to Lead docu series, and some of the other content on the app as well. So, to close us out, Jackie, let the audience know if there's a statement or a comment that you want to leave the audience with. Please do that, and then let them know exactly how they can find you.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
So the first line and last line of both of my books is, it begins with you.
Okay.
And I fully, wholeheartedly believe everything you do starts and ends with you. So if you want change in your life, if you want to spread positivity, if you want to grow, if you want to lead, it starts and ends with you. So you have to do the work first and step into it as your authentic self. So it begins with you, no excuses. So get going. That's number one on that. If you want to reach me, the best way is LinkedIn, is the platform I'm on most, and that's just Jackie Insinger. And Instagram also is at Jackie Insinger. And my email is Jackie at Spark Brilliance. My book is Spark Brilliance, and we have a new book for educators called Spark Brilliance for Educators, bringing it to the classroom. So would love to connect with anyone.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. I think I have to connect with you on LinkedIn too. But I'll do that after the
Yeah.
broadcast. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, this concludes another awesome episode of the Born to Lead docuseries. Like I said, make sure you follow us and please check us out. We are the Realizing Your Potential TV network, can be streamed on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV, as well as on your mobile, your iOS app, your Android app, and of course, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please make sure you support us and check out this episode along with the other episodes. And if you're interested in also being interviewed, then just reach out to me either on Facebook or either on LinkedIn. I'm under my name, Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison. And my email is realizing your potential, the numbers 123 at gmail.com. And just let me know you like more information in regards to being interviewed, and we'll take it from there. All right. So thanks again. And thank you, Jackie. And to all, enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you are joining us from. And until next time.